Welcome everyone to Midwest Tree ID. On this channel, it is my mission to help you learn an abundance of trees that grow right here in the Midwest, and some key features on how to identify them. There's just one thing to clarify before we begin. We're not going to be throwing hatred or ridiculing any of the species that we're going to be talking about. But we do, however, want to encourage thoughtful conversation in the comments about personal experiences and things like that. Please try to remember that everything has value and that we are here to enjoy nature and everything it has to offer. So without anything else, let's jump right in. Hey guys, thanks for joining me on Midwest Tree ID. Today we're at my parents' house in Bloomington, Illinois, and today we are taking a look at Catalpa speciosa. This is the northern Catalpa. This is going to be definitely the Catalpa that you find throughout the central and even more southern parts of Illinois, much more commonly than the southern or the Chinese Catalpa. This is the one you're going to find the vast majority of the time. And this is very easy to figure out. Okay, the leaves on the northern Catalpa, although this one here is a rather immature leaf, surprisingly enough, despite the fact that it's huge. Typically, the leaves aren't quite this big, but the northern Catalpa does typically have a much larger leaf than the southern Catalpa or the Chinese Catalpa. And these are pretty much going to be rather, I guess you'd call that ovate. Not frequently with the Chinese Catalpa, you'll see a little bit of lobing on each side. Sometimes you can see that with the Chinese Catalpa. With the northern Catalpa, very rarely are you going to see that. Not saying it can't, but very rarely will you. And unfortunately, I've missed the flowering time of the season to really showcase those. And I will show some pictures of these Catalpas at my parents' house in bloom at the end of the video. Because these Catalpas are old and they bloom every year consistently, lush blooms all the time. You can see on the ground where all the brown ones have dried up. It's like walking on brown grass. There's so many of them. But these are really cool. It's a really cool tree, very interesting. Let's go ahead and take a look at the bark, and we'll take a look at the habit. So Catalpas in general, especially the northern Catalpas, are very, very prone to hollowing out like this. I have no idea why, but it doesn't seem to affect their lifespan. They seem to be able to live for well over 100 years and not really have a whole lot of problems, despite being cited frequently as having brittle wood. But the major issue with northern Catalpa is what you kind of see happening here. A lot of offshooting on the lower parts of the trunk. Very, very common with the northern Catalpa, not as common with the southern or the Chinese. But it is something that these do quite abundantly. But the northern Catalpa is going to have very light gray bark pretty much consistently. And you can see a little bit of exfoliation here. It looks kind of flaky. It's not super brittle, but it can be a little bit squishy, kind of. But yeah, very, very gray bark. And let's go ahead and take a look at the habit. So the northern Catalpa, well, all the Catalpas, are actually in a tropical plant family. So that's one of the reasons why they do kind of have a little bit of a tropical look to them, despite the fact that they're native in much more temperate climates and grow very well in these temperate climates. But you can kind of see Catalpa has so many different shapes and sizes that it can take on. And this one here is probably a good 75 or so feet tall, maybe 80 feet. And it's got a decent spread on it. There used to be an ash tree right over here. So that's why you're kind of seeing a little bit of a dead space on one side. Yeah, very tall. These can usually be fairly oval shaped, somewhat pyramidal, but they can also take on a very, very rounded and broad canopy as well. I've seen some very, very large ones, but typically can max out at about 90 feet in height and a spread typically between 30 to 40 feet in width. That's pretty typical. So the northern Catalpa is native to much of Illinois and a lot of your other Midwestern states, Iowa, Indiana, Missouri, and you'll find it frequently in a lot of our native forests around here, though not every single one of them. It's common, but not super common. As far as landscape use, it's declined significantly in probably the last 40 or 50 years in urban communities due to its relatively brittle nature. It can have parts of it, just pieces of branches falling off, typically not like large sections at a time, but lots of smaller pieces like the tips of branches and things like that, and can make a bit of a mess in the road or on roofs or whatever. Although it's still a great tree, I think it should be used more frequently in the urban landscape, and I think it can be if you have a large enough space. I do think that it should be used for larger spaces. The root system can be fairly aggressive with Catalpa, and it can self-seed regularly. So that's one of the other problems, and one of the other main reasons why it doesn't really get a lot of usage in the urban landscape these days is because of the long pods. So I can't showcase any of those because it's still too early. But the northern Catalpa will have very, very long, slender pods. Those pods can range from a foot to a foot and a half long, and they contain hundreds, maybe thousands, probably more like hundreds of little flat seeds, and they can spread all over the place. We haven't really seen very much self-seeding from these catalpas here, probably the last decade or so. We really don't see too many volunteer catalpas anymore out here, but obviously there are areas around where you can still see that self-seeding nature. But the pods are also another common reason why it doesn't really get a lot of usage. It can be just a little bit messy, but it sure is a beautiful tree. It's perfect if you have a large open space and you have timber. It's perfect for that. Or if you're trying to fill some space in pastures, it's an excellent choice for that kind of location. And like I said, they might have brittle wood. But typically, even though they're hollowing out a lot of the time, you don't see a lot of large catalpas coming down. Sometimes, yes, of course, everything has its breaking point, but for as brittle as catalpa is often cited to be, you don't see them coming down very often. So I really enjoy northern catalpa, and I think everybody should enjoy a northern catalpa. So that's pretty much going to wrap it up for the northern catalpa. Thank you for joining me. Be sure to like and subscribe, and we will see you guys next time.